They say rejected mates don't survive. Not the physical body, that lingers, a ghost in armor, still breathing but hollow. It's the soul that dies first. The agony of a severed bond is a death sentence written in the language of fate itself, a cruel joke whispered by the moon goddess. You were chosen, but you are not wanted. It breaks something fundamental, something that can never be repaired. When Riane Solari collapsed in the snow, her scout's armor slick with ice and her own blood, she didn't fight the cold. She welcomed it. 22 years of invisible service to the Iron Frost Pack, 22 years of wearing steel instead of softness, hoping that one day her fated mate would see past the scars and the sword. And for what? To be dismissed as a defect by Tauren Blackthorn in front of the entire Alliance gathering. To watch the future Alpha curl his lip at her battle-hardened hands, to hear him declare she was unsuitable for the bloodline. Alpha Malachai's exile decree had been a mercy really. Disappear into the mountains and spare the pack the scandal. So Riane fled into the lethal blizzard, into the howling dark of the northern peaks where even the bravest wolves feared to tread. She had nothing left. No mate. No pack. No purpose. But then a shape materialized from the wideout, massive, impossibly white, with fur that seemed to glow against the storm. Eyes like burning coals, molten and ancient, fixed on her crumpled form. The legends called him the demon wolf of the peaks, the fire-scarred guardian who'd been cast out by his own kind. Riane had tracked his prince a dozen times and never found him. Now he found her. Selim didn't speak. He simply curled his enormous body around hers, a living fortress against the wind, and the strange heat radiating from the glowing scars etched across his white fur kept her heart beating when it wanted to stop. He refused to let her surrender. He refused to let fate have the final word. And as the storm raged around them, Riane would learn a truth more powerful than any bond the moon goddess could forge. Sometimes the one who saves you isn't chosen by destiny. Sometimes he's the one who chooses you back. Scars, steel, and all. Riane had worn her armor to the Frost Moon gathering because she didn't know how to be anything else. The polished steel plates felt safer than the silk gowns the other unmated females draped themselves in, their throats bared and perfumed, their laughter wind-chime delicate. She'd braided her dark hair tight against her skull, the way she did before a perimeter sweep, and stood at the edge of the ceremonial circle while the Alliance packs gathered beneath the winter stars. She told herself the armor was practical. That a scout never knew when duty would call, even during a celebration. But the truth sat heavier in her chest. She was afraid. Afraid that if Tauren saw her in anything soft, he'd see how desperately she wanted him to choose her. How much she'd already surrendered to a bond she'd felt thrumming in her veins for 3 agonizing months since his return from the northern campaigns. The mate bond was supposed to be mutual. Instant. Undeniable. But Tauren Blackthorn, golden-haired and granite-jawed, had looked right through her every single time their paths crossed in the Iron Frost compound. Until tonight. The ceremonial fire blazed high as Alpha Malachai called the unmated wolves forward, his voice booming across the frozen clearing. Riane's pulse hammered beneath her breastplate. This was the moment. The Frost Moon was sacred. Bonds that had been simmering in silence were meant to be claimed under its light. She watched Tauren step into the circle, tall and commanding in his formal black furs, and felt the pull in her soul like a fishhook lodged behind her ribs. Their eyes met. Finally, he saw her. Tauren's expression flickered, recognition, then something worse. Confusion. Distaste. He crossed the circle toward her with the measured steps of a man approaching an unpleasant task, and the other wolves went silent. Riane's hands trembled inside her gauntlets. Riane Solari. His voice carried to every corner of the gathering, formal and cold. The bond between us is acknowledged. Relief crashed through her, dizzying and bright. He felt it too. She wasn't imagining. But I cannot accept it. The world tilted. Tauren's jaw set, his golden eyes hard as he continued, You are a capable scout. Your service to the pack is noted. But you are unsuitable as a mate for the future Alpha bloodline. You wear steel like a second skin because you have no softness beneath it. You are a weapon, not a queen. I reject this bond. The words landed like silver bullets. Around them, the gathered packs inhaled as one. Shock, scandal, pity all tangled together. Riane's wolf howled inside her chest, a sound of pure anguish that only she could hear. The bond that had pulled her toward Torin for months began to tear, a physical ripping sensation that stole the air from her lungs. She staggered, caught herself, forced her spine straight even as her vision blurred. Torin's gaze slid away from her, already dismissing her existence. He turned back toward his father, toward the life he would build with someone worthy. Someone softer. Someone who knew how to be chosen. Alpha Malakai's voice cut through the ringing in Riane's ears. Scout Solari. You are released from active duty. For the dignity of this pack and the Blackthorn line, you will leave Ironfrost territory by dawn. Permanently. No trial. No defense. Just erasure. Riane didn't remember walking away from the firelight. Didn't remember the pitying looks or the whispered gossip. She only remembered the cold, and the way her armor suddenly felt like a cage, and the hollow certainty that Torin had been right about one thing. She had nothing soft left to give. The pack had made sure of that long before tonight. The storm hit before Riane reached the northern ridge. Wind howled through the mountain pass like a living thing, furious and hungry, tearing at her cloak with claws of ice. She didn't slow down. Didn't look back at the dying lights of the Ironfrost compound, at the only home she'd ever known. What was the point? She'd been erased from it the moment Torin's rejection left his lips. The pain in her chest had evolved from a sharp tear into something worse, a constant, gnawing ache that pulsed with every heartbeat. The severed bond. Her wolf whimpered and thrashed inside her, confused and grieving, unable to understand why their fated mate had cast them aside. Riane pressed a gauntlet hand to her breastplate as if she could physically hold herself together. She couldn't. The blizzard thickened, snow driving horizontal across the peaks. Visibility dropped to arm's length. Riane's legs burned, her lungs screamed, but she pushed higher into the mountains, into the territory marked red on every patrol map. The Forbidden Zone. Where the demon wolf hunted. Let him find her. Let something end this. Her boot caught on a hidden root and she went down hard, sliding across ice-slicked rock. Pain flared bright in her shoulder, but it was distant, unimportant. She lay there in the snow, armor frosting over, and felt the cold seeping through the gaps in her steel shell. Her fingers had gone numb. Her breath came in shallow clouds. Maybe this was the mercy Alpha Malakai had really offered. Not exile, just a slower, quieter death than execution. Disappear into the mountains. Spare everyone the scandal of a rejected mate who refused to die gracefully. Riane's eyes drifted closed. The wind's howl softened into something almost like a lullaby. She'd spent 22 years being useful. Being invisible. Being the blade the pack wielded and never thanked. She was so tired. A sound cut through the storm, low, resonant, not quite a growl. Riane's eyes snapped open. The wolf stood 10 paces away, massive enough to make her wolf recoil in instinctive submission. His fur was pure white, luminous against the dark fury of the blizzard, and his eyes, moon goddess, his eyes, burned like molten gold, like coals at the heart of a forge. But it was the scars that stole her breath. They traced across his body in jagged patterns that seemed to glow with an inner fire, red-orange light pulsing beneath his white coat like lava beneath snow. The demon wolf of the peaks. The legend that veteran scouts whispered about in the barracks. The creature that had torn apart a hunting party 3 winters ago and vanished into the high country, leaving only rumors and terror in his wake. Riane should have been afraid. Should have reached for the blade at her hip, should have shifted and run. But the bond sickness had drained her of everything, even fear. She simply stared at him, this impossible creature who watched her with eyes far too intelligent for a rogue. He moved closer. Slow. Deliberate. Predatory grace in every step. The glowing scars painted shadows across the snow, and Riane realized with distant fascination that they were beautiful. That whatever had marked him had left art in its wake. The white wolf circled her once, his breath misting in the frozen air. Then, with a gentleness that defied every story ever told about him, he lowered himself beside her broken body and curled his massive form around her. Heat radiated from those fire-etched scars, unnatural and utterly impossible, driving back the cold that had been seconds from claiming her. Riane's last conscious thought before the darkness took her was that she'd been rescued by a monster. And he was warmer than any bond destiny had ever promised. Riane woke to firelight and the sound of wind howling somewhere distant. Her armor was gone. Panic surged through her until she realized she was wrapped in thick furs instead, her scout's leathers still intact beneath them. Someone had removed only the steel, carefully, methodically, the way a healer would. She pushed herself upright, wincing at the protest in her shoulder. The cave was smaller than she'd expected, carved deep into the mountain's heart. A fire crackled in a stone-ringed pit, casting dancing shadows across walls etched with strange markings. Symbols she didn't recognize, older than any pack language she'd learned. And beside the fire, watching her with those burning gold eyes, sat a man. Not the white wolf. A man. But the scars were the same. They traced across his bare chest and arms in the same jagged patterns she'd seen in his wolf form, glowing with that same impossible inner light, red-orange veins of fire frozen beneath bronze skin. His hair was white as snow, falling past his shoulders, and his face was beautiful in the way cliffs were beautiful, all hard angles and dangerous edges. He wore only worn leather pants and studied her with an intensity that should have terrified her. "You're awake." His voice was rough, like he didn't use it often. "I wasn't certain you would be." Riane's hand instinctively went to her hip, searching for a blade that wasn't there. The man, the wolf, Selim, if the legends had his name right, tracked the movement but didn't react. Just waited. "The bond sickness," he said quietly. "It's already killing you. I can smell it. Death has a particular scent." She barked out a laugh, bitter and sharp. "Then you wasted your time saving me." "Perhaps." He tilted his head, firelight catching in his eyes. "Or perhaps I know what it's like to be discarded by those who should have valued you." Something in his tone made her pause. Made her really look at him beyond the scars and the legend. There was a weariness in those gold eyes that mirrored her own, ancient and bone-deep. "You're him," Riane said. "The Guardian. The one from the old stories my mother used to tell. The Sentinel of the Northern Peaks." Selim's expression flickered. That title died a long time ago, along with the wolf who believed in it. He stood, moving to a crude shelf carved into the stone where dried herbs and supplies were stored. Even his human movements carried that same predatory grace. "I was a guardian, yes. Sworn to protect the mountain passages, to keep the balance between the packs and the wildlands beyond. For 70 years, I held that oath." 70 years. Moon goddess. He was ancient. "Then the packs decided a guardian was no longer necessary," Selim continued, his back to her. "That the power I'd been granted by the old magic was a threat rather than a shield. So they bound me in silver chains and tried to drain the fire from my veins, to take the magic that made me strong enough to protect them and use it for themselves." His hand went to his chest, tracing one of the glowing scars. "The magic burned them instead. Fought back. Left these marks when it tried to escape my dying body. I barely made it to the peaks before the transformation became permanent." He turned to face her, and the firelight made the scars pulse brighter. "They called me a demon afterward. A rogue. Hunted me for years until they decided I was myth instead of threat. And I let them believe it. Let them forget I was ever anything more than a monster in their ghost stories." Riane's throat tightened. She understood that particular betrayal, being useful until you weren't, being discarded the moment you became inconvenient. "Why save me?" she whispered. Selim's gold eyes met hers, and something fierce and protective flared in their depths. "Because I remember what it feels like to lie bleeding in the snow, believing you deserved it. And I refuse to let destiny or pack politics claim another life." His words cracked something open in her chest. Not the bond wound but something deeper. Something that had been locked away beneath steel and duty for so long she'd forgotten it existed. Hope. 3 days passed in the cave, measured by the rise and fall of the storm outside and the slow, agonizing fade of the bond sickness in Riane's chest. Selim moved through the space like a shadow, bringing her water from a spring deeper in the mountain, coaxing her to eat dried meat and bitter herbs that dulled the worst of the pain. He never touched her without warning, never crowded her space, and somehow that restraint made her feel safer than any of the pack's promises ever had. On the fourth morning, Rian woke to find him sitting cross-legged by the fire, sharpening a bone knife with methodical precision. The scars along his arms pulsed with their steady inner light, and she found herself transfixed by the pattern, the way they branched and forked like lightning frozen mid-strike. Do they hurt? The question left her lips before she could stop it. Selim's hands stilled. He looked up, those gold eyes unreadable. Every moment. The magic is still trying to burn its way out, even after all these years. But I've learned to carry it. Rian sat up slowly, the furs falling away. Her own shoulder throbbed where she'd landed on the ice, bruises blooming purple across her skin. I used to think scars were proof of survival. That every mark I earned in service to the pack meant something. Meant I was strong enough to matter. She touched the thin line along her jaw, a gift from a border skirmish 2 years ago. But Torin looked at me like they were defects. Like I'd been damaged instead of forged. He's a fool. Selim's voice was flat, certain. Scars are proof you refused to break. That you survived what should have killed you and kept moving forward. Is that what yours are? Rian met his gaze. Proof you survived? Something shifted in his expression, a crack in that ancient weariness. They're proof of what I refused to become. The packs wanted a weapon they could control. The magic refused to be controlled. These scars are the battlefield where I chose myself over their expectations. The words hit her like a physical blow. Chose himself. When had she ever done that? She'd spent her entire life molding herself into whatever the Ironfrost pack needed: scout, soldier, shadow. She'd worn armor to hide how desperately she wanted to be seen, how much she craved the softness she'd been denied. And when destiny finally offered her a mate, she'd believed it would be enough. That being chosen by fate meant she mattered. But fate had given her Torin. And Torin had proven that even destiny could be wrong. I don't know how to be anything except what they made me, Rian whispered. I don't know who I am without the pack. Without the bond telling me I'm supposed to belong to someone. Selim set the knife aside and moved closer, stopping just outside her reach. Close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his scars, close enough to see the flecks of amber in his gold eyes. Then we'll figure it out together, he said. Because I've spent 70 years alone in these mountains, and I'm tired of being nothing but a ghost story. And you, his gaze traced her face like he was memorizing every line, every mark. You deserve to be more than someone's rejected choice. More than a weapon they're afraid to love. Rian's breath caught. No one had ever looked at her like that. Like she was worth choosing, not because fate demanded it, but because he wanted to. I'm still dying, she said, though the words felt less true than they had 3 days ago. The hollow ache in her chest had dulled to a manageable throb, present but no longer consuming. Maybe. Selim's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile in a different lifetime. Or maybe you're just being reborn. Fire has a way of destroying and creating at the same time. He extended his hand, palm up, those glowing scars brilliant in the firelight. An offering. A choice. Rian looked at his marked palm, then at her own scarred hands. Hands that had held swords and maps and everything except what she truly wanted. She reached out and took his hand. His skin was furnace hot, the magic beneath it thrumming like a second heartbeat. And for the first time since Torin's rejection, she felt something other than pain. She felt chosen. Rian should have known better than to come back. Should have listened to Selim's warning before she descended from the peaks, his gold eyes dark with worry as he'd watched her go. But her mother's absence from the market village had stretched into 2 weeks, and the silence gnawed at her. Eloan was a healer. She never missed a supply run. Never went quiet without reason. The Ironfrost compound looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, less imposing than it had lived in her memory. Rian kept to the shadows of the forest edge, her scout training guiding her through the patrol routes she'd memorized years ago. She'd timed her approach between guard shifts, waited until the afternoon lull when most of the pack gathered for the communal meal. Her mother's cottage sat at the eastern border, modest and surrounded by herb gardens now buried under snow. Rian's heart hammered as she approached the door, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. The wards Eloan always maintained, simple protective charms, had been torn down. The door hung slightly ajar. She pushed it open. Mother. The cottage was empty. Stripped. Her mother's healing supplies, her books, even the worn quilt from her bed, all gone. But the scent that lingered in the air made Riane's wolf snarl in recognition. Alpha Malachi had been here. Recently. She's not dead, if that's what you're wondering. Riane spun, blade drawn, but it was too late. 6 wolves emerged from the tree line, silver-tipped arrows trained on her heart. And behind them, flanked by his elite guard, stood Alpha Malachi himself. His gray-streaked hair was pulled back from a face carved by years of ruthless decisions, and his eyes held all the warmth of midwinter ice. "Stand down, Scout Solari," he said, voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Or what happens next will be significantly more painful." Riane's grip tightened on her blade, but the math was brutal and clear. 6 arrows. No cover. She lowered the weapon slowly, jaw clenched. "Where is she?" Malachi smiled, and it was the cruelest thing Riane had ever seen. "Your mother is currently our guest in the holding cells beneath the Alpha's hall. Comfortable enough, though I imagine she's confused about why her devoted daughter would abandon the pack and force us to take such measures." "I was exiled." Riane's voice shook with barely contained rage. "You ordered me gone." "I ordered you to disappear quietly and spare us the scandal of a rejected mate. Instead, you've been living in the northern peaks." His gaze sharpened, predatory and calculating. "With the demon wolf." The words hung in the frozen air. Riane's blood ran cold. "Oh yes, we know." Malachi stepped closer, his guards moving with him in perfect formation. Young Turin reported seeing tracks, one set human, one set wolf, both leading back to the Forbidden Zone. And then there are the rumors from the border patrols. Strange lights in the high caves. The white wolf appearing where he hasn't been seen in years. "Did you really think we wouldn't piece it together?" "He saved my life," Riane said through gritted teeth. "That's all." "He's a rogue who holds magic that belongs to the packs. Magic that was stolen when he fled his execution 70 years ago." Malachi's expression hardened. "And you're going to help us reclaim it?" "I won't." "You will." The Alpha gestured, and 2 guards stepped forward with silver chains. "Because if you don't lure that creature down from his mountain sanctuary, your mother dies. Slowly. And I'll make certain you hear every scream." The chains locked around Riane's wrists, burning where they touched skin. She bit back a cry, refusing to give Malachi the satisfaction. "You have 3 days to bring us the white wolf," the Alpha continued, his voice cold and final. "Alive, preferably. We'll need him conscious to extract the magic properly. Fail, and Eloan's blood is on your hands." He leaned in close, his breath hot against her ear. "Choose wisely, little scout. Your monster, or your mother. Destiny may have rejected you, but betrayal, that's a choice only you can make." They threw Riane into a cell 3 levels beneath the Alpha's hall, the silver chains still burning against her wrists. The stone walls were slick with condensation, and the air reeked of fear and old blood. She slumped against the wall, mind racing through impossible scenarios. 3 days. She had 3 days to decide which person she loved would die. Because there was no world where she could save them both. Malachi knew it. That's why he'd smiled. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Riane tensed, expecting guards, but the familiar scent of lavender and mountain sage reached her first. Her mother. Eloan appeared at the cell bars, her healer's robes torn and dirt-stained but her grey eyes sharp as ever. Behind her, 2 guards lay crumpled on the ground, unconscious. In her mother's hand, a ring of keys glinted in the torchlight. "Mother." "Hush." Eloan's fingers worked the lock with practiced efficiency. "We don't have much time. The sedative I slipped into their evening meal will wear off within the hour." The cell door swung open. Riane stared at her mother. This woman who'd spent 50 years healing pack members, following every rule, never once stepping outside the lines the Alphas drew. "You drugged the guards?" I also stole these keys from the captain's office and disabled the ward on the eastern gate. Eloan's mouth curved into something fierce and unfamiliar. Did you think I'd spent all these years being obedient? I was just waiting for a reason to stop. She knelt and unlocked the silver chains. They fell away with a hiss, leaving angry red marks on Riane's skin. Eloan's hands were gentle as she examined the burns, her healer's instincts overriding even urgency. The white wolf, her mother said quietly. The one Malachi wants. He's the reason you came back alive from that storm, isn't he? Riane's throat tightened. Yes. Then you need to warn him. Now. Eloan pulled her daughter to her feet. Malachi's already sent the silver hunters north. They left at dusk with enough poison to drop an entire pack. They're not just going to capture him, Riane. They're going to torture him until the magic breaks free, consequences be damned. Horror crashed through her. But the ultimatum, the 3 days, was a lie to keep you compliant while his hunters did the real work. Eloan's eyes blazed. He never intended to let either of you live. You were always just bait. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that Riane nearly laughed. Of course. Alpha Malachi had learned long ago that honor was a liability. Come with me, Riane urged, grabbing her mother's hand. We'll run together. Get to the peaks before. No. Eloan pulled back, her expression soft and impossibly sad. I'll slow you down, and you know it. Besides, someone needs to stay and make sure those guards don't wake too soon. Give you a real head start. Mother, they'll kill you. Perhaps. Eloan cupped Riane's face with both hands, the way she had when Riane was a child waking from nightmares. Or perhaps I'll remind them why healers know more ways to stop a heart than warriors know how to pierce one. Either way, I choose this. I choose you getting free. Tears burned hot in Riane's eyes. I can't lose you. You won't. Not the parts that matter. Eloan pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead. Now go. Save your white wolf. And Riane, her voice dropped to a fierce whisper. Stop choosing other people's expectations over your own heart. That's the only way you'll ever truly be free. She pressed a small knife into Riane's palm and shoved her toward the corridor. Riane ran, her mother's words echoing in her ears, the weight of another impossible choice crushing her chest. Behind her, Eloan began to sing, an old lullaby, hauntingly beautiful, loud enough to mask the sound of Riane's escape. Loud enough to draw every conscious guard in the compound away from the eastern gate. Riane shifted mid-stride, her wolf form bursting through with desperate speed, and fled into the night. The northern peaks loomed against the stars, and somewhere in those frozen heights, Selim was walking into an ambush he didn't know existed. She had to reach him first. Had to warn him. Had to choose. Riane found Selim at the canyon's edge, his white form stark against the pre-dawn gray. She shifted mid-leap, stumbling as her human legs hit the frozen ground, and his head snapped around, those gold eyes going wide with alarm. They're coming, she gasped out. Silver hunters. Malachi sent them hours ago. They have poison chains. An arrow whistled past her ear and buried itself in the snow. Silver-tipped. Riane dove behind an outcropping as Selim surged forward, placing his massive body between her and the tree line where the hunters emerged. 6 of them. No, 8. Led by Tauren Blackthorn himself, his golden hair pulled back, his face carved from stone and purpose. He held a crossbow loaded with silver bolts, and the way he moved spoke of military precision. This wasn't an ambush. This was an execution squad. Stand down, Riane. Tauren's voice carried across the canyon, cold and commanding. This doesn't concern you anymore. The rogue is pack business. He has a name, Riane snarled, shifting back to her wolf form. Her muscles coiled, ready. And you're not taking him. Selim's growl rumbled deep enough to shake snow from the nearby pines. The scars along his body blazed brighter, firelight pulsing beneath white fur, and for a moment the hunters hesitated. Even Tauren's certainty flickered. Then the future Alpha raised his crossbow. Surround them. Drive them toward the canyon wall. We need the creature alive, but the traitor is expendable. The hunters fanned out with brutal efficiency, silver-tipped arrows trained on both of them. Riane's mind raced. The canyon was a natural trap. Sheer rock walls on 3 sides, only one narrow path back down to safer ground. They'd been herded here deliberately, cut off from the cave network Selim knew so well. But the hunters didn't know these peaks like she did. Didn't know what 22 years of border patrol had taught her about the mountain's temperament. Riane shifted back to human form, ignoring the cold biting her skin. "Selim," she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the massive shelf of snow and rock hanging above the canyon path. "How hot can those scars burn?" His gold eyes followed her gaze. Understanding flashed between them, wordless, perfect. "Hot enough," he rumbled. "What are you?" Turin started, but Selim was already moving. The white wolf charged not at the hunters, but at the canyon wall. His body slammed into the rock face with earth-shaking force, and the scars along his spine erupted with light, not just glowing now but actively burning, heat radiating outward in waves that turned snow to steam. The temperature spiked so fast that the ice holding the shelf together began to crack. Riane grabbed a loose stone and hurled it at the weakening structure. "Run!" she screamed at Selim. The shelf gave way with a sound like thunder. Tons of snow and rock cascaded down in a devastating avalanche, cutting straight across the canyon path between them and the hunters. Turin shouted orders, his voice swallowed by the roar. His team scattered, some leaping backward to safety, others caught at the edges and buried to their waists. The world turned white with powder and chaos. When the rumbling finally stopped, a wall of debris 15 feet high separated the hunters from their prey. On the other side, Riane could hear Turin screaming commands, could hear the frantic digging as they tried to clear a path. It would take them hours. Maybe more. Selim shifted to human form beside her, his chest heaving, the scars still glowing like coals against his bronze skin. That was insane. That was survival. Riane's wolf howled triumph inside her chest. "Come on. We need to move before they regroup." But Selim caught her wrist, his grip gentle despite the adrenaline still coursing through both of them. "You came back. You could have run anywhere after escaping, but you came back to warn me." "Of course I did." The words came out fiercer than she intended. "You're not expendable. Not to me." Something shifted in his expression, wonder mixed with that fierce protectiveness she'd seen in the cave. He pulled her close, his forehead pressing against hers, and for one stolen moment beneath the mountain sky, nothing else existed except the two of them breathing the same frozen air. Then reality crashed back. Voices echoed from beyond the debris wall. They had minutes at best. "There's a passage through the eastern ravine," Selim said. "Hidden. Even the old scouts don't know it. We can lose them in the deep valleys." Riane nodded, but her heart ached. "My mother. We'll find a way to save her. Together." His gold eyes burned with certainty. "But first we survive." They ran. The eastern ravine narrowed to barely a wolf's width, the stone walls pressing close enough that Riane could touch both sides at once. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit had faded, temporarily. Selim moved ahead in wolf form, his glowing scars illuminating the path through the darkness. They'd been running for hours, exhaustion clawing at Riane's legs, but stopping meant capture. Meant death. The ravine opened suddenly into a small clearing ringed by ancient pines. Moonlight spilled across the snow, beautiful and treacherous. Selim stopped abruptly, his ears flattening. Riane shifted beside him, reaching for the knife her mother had given her. Turin stepped from the shadows alone. No hunting party. No silver arrows trained on them. Just the future alpha with his hands raised, empty and open, his expression carved from something that looked dangerously close to regret. "I'm not here to fight," he said quietly. Selim's growl vibrated through the clearing. Riane's grip tightened on her blade. "Then why are you here?" "To let you go." Turin's golden eyes, so like Selim's but colder, harder, fixed on Riane. "And to tell you I'm sorry." The words landed like stones. Riane barked out a bitter laugh. "Your apology is 4 days and a mountain of damage too late." "I know." Turin took a careful step forward, his movements slow and deliberate. I watched you trigger that avalanche. Watched you throw yourself between the hunters and him without hesitation. Watched you choose a rogue legend over your own safety, over any chance of returning to the pack. His voice cracked slightly. And I realized I've never seen you fight like that for anything. Not in all the years we trained together. Not even for the pack you bled for. Because the pack never gave me anything worth fighting for, Rian shot back. You certainly didn't. No, I didn't. Torin's jaw clenched. I looked at you that night at the frost moon and saw everything my father taught me to see, a warrior who didn't fit the mold of what an alpha's mate should be. Someone too scarred, too hard, too dangerous. I was afraid of what the pack would say. Afraid of choosing wrong. He gestured toward Selim, who stood rigid and watchful beside Rian. But you weren't afraid to choose him. This creature the pack calls a demon, who my father wants to chain and bleed. You chose him knowing it would cost you everything. Because he chose me first, Rian said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Because he saw me as more than a weapon. More than broken. He saw me and decided I was worth saving. Torin flinched like she'd struck him. I see that now. I see what I threw away. He pulled something from his belt, a small leather pouch that clinked with metal. My father sent me ahead to track you down, to signal the others when I found you. But I'm not going to do that. He tossed the pouch at Rian's feet. Silver coins spilled across the snow, enough to buy supplies for months. There's a settlement 3 days east, beyond pack territories. Humans and wolves who've rejected the old laws. They don't ask questions. Why? The word tore from Rian's throat. Why help us now? Because watching you nearly die for him showed me what the mate bond should have been. Torin's expression twisted with something raw and painful. You were never unsuitable, Rian. I was. I was too much of a coward to deserve you. He turned to leave, then paused. Your mother. She's alive. Confined, but alive. My father's too afraid of the Pack Healers Guild to harm her. They've been less cooperative since your escape. Hope flared in Rian's chest, bright and desperate. Torin. I'll do what I can to protect her. It's not enough. It'll never be enough to make up for what I did to you. His shoulders sagged. But it's all I can offer. Selim shifted to human form, his scars casting dancing shadows across the snow. The hunters. Your father will know you let us go. Let him know. Torin's voice hardened with resolve. I'm done living by his rules. Done choosing politics over what's right. His eyes met Rian's one last time. Be happy. That's all I ask. Be happier than I could have ever made you. He disappeared into the trees before either of them could respond, his footsteps fading into the night. Rian stared at the silver coins gleaming in the moonlight, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. Selim's hand found hers, warm and steady. Do you regret it? Choosing this path? Rian looked up at him, at his fire-etched scars and ancient eyes, at the creature who'd curled around her dying body and refused to let her surrender. Not for a single moment. His smile was worth every sacrifice. Spring came to the valley like a whispered promise, melting the snow from the mountain peaks and coaxing wildflowers from the thawed earth. Rian stood at the edge of the settlement they'd built. 12 cabins arranged in a loose circle around a central fire pit, smoke rising from morning cook fires into the clear blue sky. 6 months ago, this had been nothing but an abandoned trading post and broken dreams. Now it was home. The hollow ache in her chest had finally disappeared 3 weeks past, the severed mate bond dissolving like morning frost under sunlight. She'd woken one day and realized the phantom pull toward Torin was simply gone. No more pain. No more grief. Just peace and the certain knowledge that destiny's choice had never been hers to begin with. Deep thoughts. Selim's voice was warm as he approached, 2 wooden cups of tea in his hands. He'd let his white hair grow longer, and the fire-etched scars along his arms glowed softly in the morning light. Gentler now, as if the magic had finally settled into something less violent. Grateful thoughts, Rian corrected, accepting the cup. Mira and her cubs arrived last night. That makes 15 refugees we've taken in since winter. 16, Selim said with a slight smile. Young Kieran showed up at dawn. Rejected by his pack for being too weak to shift fully. He's sleeping in the healer's cabin now. Riane's heart clenched. She knew that particular wound, being deemed insufficient, wrong, broken. We'll need to expand the gardens if we keep growing like this. Then we'll expand. Selim's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. That's what this place is for. Every wolf the packs discarded, every soul told they weren't enough, they all have a place here. Movement caught Riane's eye, her mother emerging from the largest cabin, her healer's bag slung over one shoulder. Eloan had arrived 2 months ago, smuggled out of Ironfrost territory by Torin himself in an act of defiance that had reportedly caused a rift between father and son. She looked younger now, unburdened by pack politics, her grey hair loose and her smile genuine. "Morning, loves," Eloan called. "I'm heading to the northern border to check on the sentries." Marcus reported some inflammation in his shoulder. "Tell him to stop trying to out-wrestle wolves half his age," Riane said with affection. Marcus was a grizzled former enforcer who'd been exiled for questioning an alpha's brutal tactics. He'd arrived broken and bitter, but the valley had a way of healing more than just physical wounds. After Eloan departed, Selim tugged Riane toward the path leading up to their own cabin. Smaller than the others, built into the hillside with windows facing the sunrise. Inside, maps covered one wall, marking safe routes and pack territories to avoid. A project table held half-finished carvings, Selim's newest hobby. Their bed was piled with furs and well-worn quilts. It wasn't grand. It wasn't what any pack would consider worthy of a former scout or an ancient guardian. But it was theirs. Chosen, not assigned. "I had a dream last night," Selim said, settling onto the bed and pulling Riane down beside him. "About this place 10 years from now. 50 cabins. 100 wolves who'd found their way here. Children who'd never know what it feels like to be called defective." Riane rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady drum of his heart. "And were we still here? In your dream?" "Always." His arms wrapped around her, warm and certain. "Building something that lasts. Something that proves rejected doesn't mean broken. That being unwanted by the wrong people just means you're free to find the right ones." Through the window, Riane could see members of their small community emerging for the day. Myra's cubs chasing each other in circles, young Kieran hesitantly joining a group for breakfast, Marcus laughing at something one of the younger wolves said. All of them carrying scars, visible and invisible. All of them healing. No regrets. Selim asked quietly, the question he'd asked a dozen times in the past 6 months. Riane tilted her face up to kiss him, slow and sweet and full of everything words couldn't capture. "Not a single one. Destiny chose wrong. But I chose right." His scars glowed brighter, warm as summer sun, and in the valley below, the sanctuary they'd built for the rejected and the lost thrived in the light of choices made freely, bonds formed willingly, and love given without the chains of fate. They had chosen each other. And that made all the difference.